the people I wrote about, as well as a whole lot of other people. I mean, it's a step of courage to get out of bed in the morning. It's a step of courage to go to battle the many things they have to battle day in, day out, and it's literally every day. So I kind of started to think to that effect. It was like, if I just got to muster up the courage to do these individual things, that's nothing compared to what they'd got to do each day. And so, and that's not anything that I necessarily put in a book, but that kind of made me realize, like, yeah, I can do this. And then I think also, back to my faith and where that is, I started to realize, like, I don't have to, at a young age, I don't have to try to impress everybody. I don't have to try to be something I'm not. And so to admit that we're all broken in some way, shape, or form, and admit that there's some things that are there, again, that's very freeing as well. And so once I started to do that and realize that the people in my life that really love me are going to love me regardless.
Welcome to the 5 Flavors of Happiness, hosted by Susan Piper.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for tuning into the 5 Flavors, a podcast all about happiness. Today, I am super excited. We are sitting down with Mike Behrhorst, multi-generational farmer, broadcaster, MC, auctioneer, cattle judge, my corporate colleague, and author of Lessons Learned from a Broken Mind, a tiny little book that is so jam-packed with wisdom in the most unexpected of places. Mike, thank you so much for being with us today.
Hey, Susan, man, what an honor. Really appreciate it. Thanks for reaching out. I am excited to have a conversation. And I was thinking about that. If you don't mind, I was actually going to mention, you said colleague there at the end. Obviously, we work closely together, just right next to each other in terms of our office spaces. And I was thinking about this. I wonder how many of your listeners wonder if you are truly this joyful all the time. And I'm going to tell all your listeners, yes, she is. And it is
Aw.
amazing. So I appreciate when you asked this, I was like, oh, for sure. Because if I get to have a conversation with somebody that exudes happiness like you do, of course I would want to. So listeners out there, she really is this happy all the time. And it is a blessing to everyone around her. So just wanted to start with that, but I'm excited.
Oh, Mike, thank you so much. That was so kind. Um, okay, so this is a relatively short podcast, so I'm just going to dive right into it. And I want to talk about the lessons. Guys, Mike breaks this book up into 3 distinct parts. And the first part, we learn all about Matt. And my big takeaways from Matt were about being present and being intentional. And I think something that a lot of us I know I struggle with is being authentically happy for other people and not saying, "Gosh darn, why didn't I get that promotion? Why can't I have that vacation? Why is like I think we do that a lot. Talk to us about Matt and how you met him and how you were able to get all of this amazing wisdom from your interactions with him.
Yeah, and appreciate you starting there because, first thing is these are all real people that I've interacted with, and like you mentioned, I mean, Matt's a real guy. Nothing that I'm coming up with. Still talk to him on occasion. Now that I'm out here in Raleigh, I don't get to chat with him as much back in Iowa. But I think you mentioned the 2 big ones for me too. That being intentional and present, and through the interactions with Matt, he was one of those as he was struggling, and it's visible that he struggles with some issues. You don't always sit there and recognize what they're doing right or how special it makes you feel. And it took me a little bit, but finally I realized I started. Let me step back. I started to go to the grocery stores where I met him, and a lot of people you don't like going to the grocery store for the most part, especially me. But I started realizing like I was kind of coming up with excuses to go to the grocery store, and that got me thinking about, well, why? And most of it was because I got the chance to talk to Matt, which then started to dig in a little bit more to, if I got a chance to talk to him, why did I want to talk to him? And this was definitely the first one, was that intentional and present thing. And you said it, man, in our world, it's a lost art. It really is. We have so many distractions. We have so many opportunities to be thinking about other things. And I think at this point in time, we don't even realize how distracted we are a lot of times. And I'll give you an example. You've probably dealt with it too. I mean, how many times have you been in a work meeting or on a Zoom or working through that, and you can see the person's face? They're looking down, they're scrolling at a phone, they're checking an email. I know a number of people that are replying to emails in a room, and then when you think about how that makes you feel, it can be frustrated, you can be upset, you can be bummed out a little bit from that, and so those are kind of the things that kind of started coming to my mind with him was when I was with him, man, he was locked in, and he was listening to everything I said, and there was no, it didn't even matter if somebody else walked by, he wasn't, switching his attention somewhere else, and so that really kind of showed me how much I needed to be better at that because I'm just as guilty as everyone else. And then I think when you mention some of the other things that he comes there is the happy for others. You said it, and I am so guilty of it, especially with kids. This is where I started to recognize I want my kids to do so well, and I want them to be the winners and the things. And I started to see myself being like, I wasn't happy for other people when they had success because that meant that my kids didn't have as much success. Or like you said, if I didn't get to be the one that was in the spotlight, or those that didn't get the promotion, those kind of things. And Matt was so impressive because he was genuinely happy with the successes I was having. And in the book, it talks about it. The reason he knew was because of some of the things I was doing around my hometown. So he was watching it, and he was genuinely happy for me. It wasn't a jealousy. It wasn't a, I wish it was me. It wasn't those kind of things. He was genuinely like, hey, I'm glad that you get that blessing and that's working out for you. And man, we can all learn from that because, again, I'm guilty of every single one of these things. Is we live in a world where it's hard to say, you know what, I'm happy for that person and it's their day to shine.
Right. It's so funny. I was at dinner last night and I said to my husband and daughter, and I was like, put down your phone. Stop being distracted. I just want to talk to you guys. It doesn't matter what we talk about, but I just want you to be here with me. So I understand. And for our folks listening, um, Matt has a disorder, yes?
Yeah, so it's a severe form of ADHD, and but he's in his 30s, so he's an adult, but still needs some assistance and a few different things. But he works there at the grocery store, has for years. He's kind of an iconic piece of the grocery store now in terms of not only being there, but who he interacts with, and so yeah, he struggles with the title of the book of the broken mind of what we would kind of call a broken mind, and struggles with that, but yet obviously, he had a lot to provide in terms of a few quick lessons that, again, if we're not paying attention, we don't always notice.
Oh, I wanted to ask you about one other bit before we go to Carol and Herb. I loved this part. Because my husband does this all the time because he talks to everybody under the sun, and I know he would have done it. And I just loved the fact that you did it as well. So, guys, one day it was snowy and it was really, really cold. And like you tell us the story about how Matt's out there and he's taking all the shopping carts and it's, a big job and it's freezing and you're doing all of this work and you stop and well, you tell us the story.
Yeah, so yeah, to give a little context for anybody that wouldn't, North Central Iowa in the middle of winter is not fun, like in any way, shape, or form. So it was really terrible out, and so wind blowing, snow blowing, ice everywhere. And then I think the other big thing is that what people don't realize is when you get to the middle of winter, you've tried to clear off the snow, but you don't get it all. So then you've got chunks of ice on the ground. There's still snow drifts in different spots. So just the act of pushing a single cart is a real pain. And here he is out there collecting all the carts from the cart corral, moving them back towards there. And yeah, I sat there. I pulled in and watched him start his pattern of pulling out the carts and what he was working through. And I'm just sitting there thinking, man, I mean, for lack of a better term, I was like, man, that sucks. That does not look fun at all. And I wasn't dressed the part that day, because I'd been in my warm truck or warm house, and so I didn't need it. I just had a coat on, but didn't have anything else. And but I was kind of struck with like, you know what, I need to go offer to help. But it talked about it in the book. It's interesting because he was real quick to just be like, hey, no, and he was in a great mood. He was out there, fighting against the elements where we would all sit there and tuck our head and go. "Ugh." no, I'm heading inside as quick as I can. But he was joyful and happy to do his job to the best of his ability.
God, it's such a beautiful thing because so many of us would have been angry that we had to work, and instead he found the joy in his job. So just gorgeous. But now I want to go into the middle of the book, Carol and Herb. And this is, folks, this is when we talk about how memories really matter. And one piece of information that you learned from them that I think kind of transcends age. At first, I was thinking, oh, well, it's more pronounced at age. But then I thought, no, it's not. It's asking for help and how it's okay. And it's really funny because a friend of mine just recently, she texted me and she asked me for help on an ad. And I was so happy to do it. I was like, oh, this is so awesome. You want me to help you? And I came up with all these ideas and I was running around the house telling my husband, I was like, oh, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? How is this going to help her? And I thought to myself, I don't know if I would have done that. I think I would have tried to do it myself, but then she gave me the opportunity to be of service, and she was able to learn from me because I'm a little bit further along in my career and she's just beginning. So it was so nice to look back and to lift up. Um, and I think sometimes I struggle with that. I struggle with saying, "Hey, can you help me?" Because I don't want anyone to think that I can't do everything. And that's that's not a good thing. Talk to us about Carol and Herb.
Yeah, what you just said there too, I think, we all get very scared of it because we think it shows weakness, and it sets the opposite, and we also don't realize the other side of it is when you ask for help, of course, you're getting help, but you're truly actually blessing the other person too because they get an opportunity to do what they're really good at, and man, again, though, we struggle so mightily with it, and, Carol and Herb, grandparents, one of them, mine, the other one married into my wife's, grandpa, and that's where you mentioned the age piece as they got older, started to battle dementia, and Alzheimer's, both of them, and really struggled through that. And I think the big thing for them, it was twofold, was, not only with the Alzheimer's and the dementia, of course, you start to lose your ability just to think straight and to do the things you normally would. So they didn't, always wanna ask for help because of that. But then also, if you look at their background and stuff too, these were just tough old farmers, great guys. I mean, but they like the strongest people you could possibly meet, and it was instilled in them that same kind of thought of, nope, I can do it myself. And if I ask for help, that's not good. That means I'm not not as good as I think I should be, or I'm weak, or that. And it's a mentality that many of us get. Doesn't matter if you're a farmer or not. It doesn't matter, gender wise either and stuff too, because I see it on both sides. A lot of people say, oh, that's a man thing. And it is, but it goes both sides to where we're kind of conditioned to say it's not okay to fail. And we're conditioned to say it's not okay to show that maybe you aren't the best at something. And so this was one of those lessons that I learned from watching that wasn't necessarily what they were trying to teach because they were struggling through the Alzheimer's and the dementia at the time. But it quickly became something I started to realize with them was I just wish they knew that it was okay to accept that help and that they could accept it and it would help them. And then just like I was saying, more than anything, man, it means a lot to the people that get to help. Because you just said it, like, how good does that feel when we get the opportunity to be able to serve someone else and help someone else, but you can only do it if somebody lets you. And so it's kinda I feel like fairly powerful on both sides of that, and something that, again, I don't care what age it is or what gender or what side of things that you're on. I mean, we can all do that because I think we all get caught up pretty quickly trying to prove that we're something sometimes we're not.
100%. And now I want to segue into the part of the book, guys, that, and usually I don't cry when I read books. I don't really cry at movies. But this is the one part of the book this is the part of the book that I cried. This was the part of the book that was very emotional. Um, so before we dive into her name is Betty. Tell me, was she the inspiration for this book?
By far, and So spoiler, I guess, for everybody that's in there, I kind of try to write it a little bit differently so you don't know right off the bat. But Betty is mom to me, and I think the thing that when you ask the inspiration that was there, that was the original, but maybe not the full book, but it was the original impetus for everything. So just a little backstory to that. The people that know me will know I'm a hugger. I like to give hugs. I think they're awesome, and have for a long time. And I remember, gosh, when I was 17, 18, somewhere in there, I had a friend that was just like, dude, why are you hugging? Because of course, when you're that age, everybody's like, what the heck are you doing? And I was really quick to respond. I was like, well, mom, she taught me that this was a really good thing. And then that got me thinking because I had never actually thought about the fact that I was a hugger because of my mom. I don't know why, but especially at that age, you don't really think deeply into what you're doing. And so through that, I started to recognize a lot of other things that I was doing or that had shaped me from this. And spoiler alert again here too. Obviously, with the title of the book, she battled a lot of mental illness and severe mental illness. She was manic depressive, schizophrenic, bipolar, and so she had battled all these things. So for the longest time, I always more thought of her as not normal, was more, and unfortunately, that was kind of my viewpoint of her. And it took until I got a bit older to realize these things that had shaped me from somebody we would call not normal. And so, yes, that was the basis of it, was just starting to recognize like, wow, she shaped me, and not only me, but other people around her, through a lot of ways. And she wasn't who somebody would claim to be an expert in anything. And quite honestly, if you knew everything she was battling, most people would stay away from. And so that kind of became definitely the backbone of it. So I just wanted to be able to tell the stories of her. And then I started to realize these things with these other individuals as well, too, as I got older and interacting, and I started to see those things and started to look in different spots for some wisdom, and that's where the other ones pulled out of there. And then when it kind of finally all came together, is I'd been thinking about this for a long time of like, should I write this down? Should I put it together? And I was actually talking to a cousin of mine, and his comment to me, he's like, well, why wouldn't you? Because even if nobody ever buys that book or nobody ever looks at it, you have now a collection of wonderful lessons that your family can use, that's in a hardbound, your copy, and it can be used there. And so that's what the little push over the edge was for me to say, yeah, it's worth doing. And then let it see what it does and where it impacts. And so but back to your original question, yeah, she was definitely the reason or the inspiration behind the start of it. And then also a lot of the reason I started to recognize in others that there was different places that I could be learning than the standard ones that we kind of all look to in the rest of society.
Awesome. The one part about Betty that it really stayed with me was you say forgiveness equals healing. And I could imagine, I mean, I have a teenager at home and I was a teenager obviously, and you're not always your best self. Let's just say when you're a teenager. So I'm sure there was some things that maybe you had to forgive yourself, you had to forgive her. Um, Talk to us about forgiveness equals healing.
It is, it's so massive, and it's interesting because I'm sure your listeners, they're going to listen to this and go, "Oh yeah, I've heard that." Like it is a statement that kind of gets made here and there too. It's like, well, until you forgive, or you can't really get over it. But it is so wildly real, and I think a couple different sides of it is we usually look at it as from the standpoint of um, I need to forgive someone else. We're always saying like, okay, I need to forgive someone else, but sometimes it's what you were just saying is like, I need to forgive myself in some of these things too, or I need to ask for forgiveness. And like we always sit there and say like, I need this, but maybe we don't reach out to it. In this example, with my mom, and I love how you're teeing these up. You're saying these really well as far as how we all are as teenagers. Um, I say it in there too, and it's a bummer to admit it, but I was not nice to my mother growing up. When she was battling with everything, and of course me being what I thought was a tough young guy, and being a teenager and stuff, is more the adage of why can't you just be normal? And it wasn't a how can I help you through this? It was instead of I'm really frustrated with you and mad at you for this. And so man, it was a real struggle for a lot of years, both ways. And it took me until later in life to recognize how often she had to forgive me because I was quite honestly like pretty terrible in some cases. The things I would say, how I would act, what I would do. Now, don't get me wrong. I did nice things too. I wasn't absolutely horrible all the way through, but there were still plenty of things I can think back to and be like, man, that had to hurt. I had to have really hurt her deep. And all the way through that, though, she was forgiving. And now I know that's a little easier, of course, a mother to a child. Same as it probably is for you and you, and same for me and my kid. Um, but the real lesson is within that is that that was her only way of stepping forward was she had to let that go and forgive it because she knew that I was an imperfect person. We all are. We're all going to do bad things in those, but don't let that eat us up. Now I wish I would say I learned that lesson immediately and I figured that out. I didn't. I went through a lot of years of being the opposite. I was the one that wasn't given forgiveness. I was bitter towards things. I was frustrated with why isn't it working out for me and kind of wanting to put the blame game on stuff when I was wronged. Um, but man, the freedom that comes with finally letting those things go, it's almost indescribable. And that's what I think is hard is when you ask people to do it who haven't done it before, or at least on a big level, you're asking a lot and you can't really describe it. It's the craziest thing, but it is. It's just weight comes off your shoulders. You find a freedom within that, and then to what I was saying in the beginning, like I started to think more about what a gift it is to the other person as well too, because sometimes it's not all about us. And we always want to say, well, I need the forgiveness or you owe me an apology or those kind of things. Well, the impact it has on the other person to know that you care enough about that is also really big as well too. So it does, and that is truly about the only way you can heal. As soon as I started forgiving, man, things started to make a little bit more sense. Things started to add up and definitely change.
Let me ask you, was there an aha moment or was it through your faith? When did you say, I've got to go on this journey of forgiveness? How did you get to that point?
Yeah, so, for me personally, it was kinda two-step. One was, and she's a godsend for sure, is my wife. When we re-met and started dating and got to the point where we knew we were wanting to do, some things through marriage, we were in our counseling stuff through church that you do for, pre-marriage that everybody kinda goes through, but it was very big, when our pastor mentioned this, like, have you forgiven yourself? Do you realize and have you asked for forgiveness first, from Christ, and then have you forgiven yourself? And I realized, like, no, I never had. I'd always believed and I'd always been, but I'd never done those 2 things, and so through that, I can actually specifically go to the moment where I finally, went down on my knees and I prayed, and it wasn't only, I prayed for forgiveness, from a spiritual standpoint through Christ, but then I also, prayed for those that may not even know it, like, that I had hoped that it was in their heart that they would forgive me and that I was gonna forgive myself for those things, and it was it's a laundry list. We all have a laundry list of those things. And in that session, man, that's where I could say I could just feel everything kind of break off and peel off. And then from that point on, though, it's not like immediately, okay, now I'm perfect and everything's good. You had to unwind some of those things, but it finally gave me a little bit of a platform to say it's okay to admit that you were wrong in some of these things, and it's okay to accept that forgiveness through it. So those were kind of the big moments in mine. And then it's a daily deal. I think that's the other thing some don't realize is not only forgiveness, in spiritual life, but also forgiveness with others. You are going to do something wrong consistently. It's human nature, not, and you don't even have to mean to, but it's gonna happen. And so why not make it a consistent act of saying, you know what, I'm sorry for that. Would you forgive me? And I do it to this day, even with my kids, because there's times I do the things I shouldn't, and I say the things that I shouldn't, and I have to come back to them and be like, man, I look at that, and that was pretty terrible. Will you forgive me? And what it does for both sides of the equation is amazing.
Awesome. Okay, so I have one last question. Um, So it's about writing this book. And it's a twofold question, really, because you're so vulnerable in this book. So, one, how did you get to find the courage to be so vulnerable? And how has the act of writing the book helped you on your healing journey?
Um, so to the first question, I think there's a couple different things on the courage piece. First off, and again, I know everybody's got different beliefs and feelings towards this stuff, but for me personally, it was definitely it's a courage that comes from Christ. It's in my faith that comes there, and once I recognize that and knowing that that I could step forward in faith in that made a huge difference, and so I do believe that's at the core. Um, Another piece though too was also as I started to think through these things was recognizing the courage it takes from everybody I was writing about for them to just take a step each day. Like, and so here I am thinking about trying to do like a thing, either write a book or sometimes when you do something that's scary and there are moments that you have to deal with it. The the people I wrote about, as well as a whole lot of other people, I mean, it's a step of courage to get out of bed in the morning. It's a step of courage to go to battle the many things they have to battle day in day out, and it's literally every day. So I kind of started to think to that effect. It was like if I just got to muster up the courage to do these individual things, that's nothing compared to what they'd got to do each day. And so, and that's not anything that I necessarily put in the book, but that kind of made me realize, like, yeah, I can do this. And then I think also, back to my faith and where that is, I started to realize, like, I don't have to, at a young age, I don't have to try to impress everybody. I don't have to try to be something I'm not. And so to admit that we're all broken in some way, shape, or form, and admit that there's some things that are there, again, that's very freeing as well. And so once I started to do that and realize that the people in my life that really love me are going to love me regardless, even when they know the good, the bad, the indifferent. And I needed to quit worrying so much about the people that I don't know and what their opinion really is. And so then that opened it up to kind of be that way. And there's a lot more behind um, the whole story that is, I guess, my childhood and all that. There's it could probably be a book in itself. So there's a lot there, and I try not to dig into it too terribly much, but I want to be vulnerable enough to let people know that I know everybody else has got the same type of stories, and it's okay to let those out. And so I think that was definitely a courage piece for me. And now I'm forgetting your second part of it because I rambled on so long of your question there.
Oh, no worries. But I totally agree with you because it is freeing when you're able to be your authentic self and you just say, you know what, this is who I am. And if you don't like me, that's fine. We don't all have to like each other, but let's just be respectful. Even for me doing this podcast, because I was like, okay, I'm going to put myself out there. Can I do it? And then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to be myself and let's see. And if people like it, great. And if they don't, that's fine too. The last question, and then I'll let you go. And this was the other part was how has the act of writing the book, because people always talk about, one of our guests talked about journaling and how important journaling was. And I kind of feel like it was journaling in a way. How has that helped you on your healing journey?
Yeah, okay, and great question with that too. I think, like to say with the journaling, one of the biggest things it causes you to do is really get detailed in your thoughts. So you can think about it all day long, and you can let those tumble around in your mind. You can think about the different pieces of these stories that were there, but until I actually started to write them out, it caused me to get very detailed in exactly what was going on and what was happening. Even down to you mentioned it there when I'm pulling into a parking lot and what was the weather like and what was he up to? What was he wearing? Like those kind of things. And they're there, but it causes you to focus deeply in that. And then through those details, you start to kind of discover the reason again you were shaped, because we usually try to keep it really high level, and instead we don't dig down to it. Instead, we need to get and dig down into it. So those things started to kind of lay the groundwork for just truly understanding why I felt the way I felt, why I had the lessons that I had. And, there's other things besides this book too. There's things I learned about myself of why I was doing things that weren't good. Uh, and it caused me to kind of focus into that. So that was a big piece of it. And then the second part that has been really cool and very encouraging, it seems maybe self-serving a little bit, but has been the support after publishing it and sending it out. The number of people that have come up and had conversations, even this right here of you being kind enough to ask to be on this and to be able to talk through it, that starts to it starts to again build a I'd say kind of healing or starts to fill your bucket to a way to where you start to say, okay, I get why I went through these things, or I get why these things happen. I'm starting to understand why they happen to the people I'm writing about, because that was the vessel needed to share this. And so then you start to see those things, and it starts to make you understand like why some of those wounds maybe that you had needed to happen. And you can't heal a wound until you've figured out the basis of it, so that you can go through it. And so this definitely helped me with that. And then now with the kind of support that comes with it, it consistently encourages me in it. And so I think both those acts definitely help me walk through some of those things and really lock eyes with good things and bad things along the way, that I needed to go back to our original conversation. I needed to forgive myself for, that I needed to ask for forgiveness for, and then let those chains kind of go away. So, and throughout all of it, it's been a really cool process, and it's been really, really exciting to again talk to the people afterwards and continue conversations that come out of it. It's been a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, Mike, thank you so much for writing it. Thank you for allowing yourself to be so vulnerable because I think this little book is going to make a big difference. And even if it helps, even if this podcast helps one person pick this book up, then it's absolutely worth it. And folks, I'm going to drop the link in the description so you could definitely um, find this book, and I encourage you to read it. And don't forget to like and subscribe to this podcast so then you can listen to more of our wonderful guests. Mike, thank you so much for being here with us today. This was such an awesome conversation. I am so thankful for you.
Uh, Same back to you. Thanks again for having me, and beyond even what you do on here, thanks for just being a good shining light to those people around you, for being so joyful. It is much needed in this world, and I appreciate that more than you know. So thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks, folks, and we'll see you next time.